Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming out of this hour. President Donald Trump demands Iran's unconditional surrender, marking a sharp escalation 1 week into the war launched by the United States and Israel. The comments come as mediation efforts begin to emerge, even as Israel carries out new strikes and Iran fires missiles into the country and Gulf states hosting US bases. Israel pounds Hezbollah-controlled southern suburbs of Beirut with airstrikes, escalating a conflict that has killed more than 200 people and forced hundreds of thousands from their homes. The Israeli military ordered residents to evacuate the densely populated area before the strikes, targeting what it says are Hezbollah strongholds in and around the Lebanese capital. Burning aircraft and large plumes of smoke are seen at Tehran's Mehrabad airport after strikes reportedly hit Iran's busiest domestic aviation hub. The attack comes as Israel says it is launching a broad new wave of strikes across Iran. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls for an immediate ceasefire in Iran during a phone call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. Moscow says Putin urged a return to political and diplomatic solutions as the war between Iran, Israel, and the United States continues. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington is closely tracking reports that Russia may be sharing intelligence with Iran about US military movements. He says the US is factoring all such information into its battle plans as Moscow confirms President Putin's conversation with Pezeshkian. Saudi Arabia says it has intercepted 6 drones headed for a major oil field and a ballistic missile targeting a military airbase. Officials say the drones were aimed at the Shabah oil field, which produces about 1 million barrels of oil a day, while the missile was headed for Prince Sultan Air Base used by US forces. Azerbaijan says it has foiled a series of alleged Iranian terrorist attacks and arrested 7 people accused of working with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. The claim comes a day after Baku accused Iran of firing drones at an airport and a school in an Azerbaijani border region. In other news, Italian President Sergio Mattarella declares the Milan Cortina Winter Paralympic Games open as the Games begin in northern Italy. The opening ceremony is marred by boycotts from several countries over Russian athletes competing under their national flag, with some spectators booing Russia during the parade. We are, of course, covering the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. We have some of the latest updates coming your way. First of all, Israel has launched a new wave of strikes on Tehran as tensions in the Middle East continue to rise. The strikes come as US President Donald Trump reiterated that only Iran's unconditional surrender would end the ongoing conflict. In retaliation, Iran has launched missile and drone attacks on Israel and its Gulf neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, where a missile was intercepted near a US military base. Joining us now to discuss the escalating tensions and conflict in the Middle East is Daniel Roth, the research director at United Against Nuclear Iran, joining us live from New York. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us here on the broadcast. First of all, just a few hours ago, Donald Trump issued his usual maximalist demands, demanding an unconditional surrender. Given Iran's current capabilities, etc., how likely is it that we see that from Tehran?
Well, in the short term, unlikely. However, the longer that this goes on, the pounding of IRGC, the assassinations of the leadership themselves, we may very well see a kind of splintering of the top echelons, maybe someone from that group, and I imagine the CIA is monitoring this quite carefully, um, could possibly be in contact with the US and say, I don't want to be killed anymore. Here is the group that is ready to make a deal with you, and here are the terms of our surrender. So difficult to speculate right now. In the short term, very, very unlikely. This is obviously a very entrenched regime that's been going on for almost half a century. They have pretty well established precedents. Once the supreme leader fell, which is what happened a few days ago, and the IRGC is a very ideologically committed group of people. However, I could envisage a scenario maybe 4 or 5 weeks or months down the line where it becomes untenable and there is some kind of splintering.
And Daniel, we're hearing reports of strikes escalating by the night in the Iranian capital. What exactly are the targets for the United States, given that situation on the first day of the conflict when the supreme leader was assassinated?
The targets right now, I imagine, would be those apparatuses of suppression, the IRGC bases, the security forces, perhaps MOIS, the Ministry of Intelligence Services, all those groups, of which there are many in Tehran, that are suppressing, repressing, surveilling Iranians, and kind of coordinating the external strikes amongst the Gulf and against Israel and against American bases. So I think the plan would be pretty clear for now. I heard just before that I think the Israelis had targeted the Mehrabad airport. That is a kind of dual-use airport. It's civilian, but mainly military. There's lots of IRGC assets, military assets there. So really, it's still a target-rich environment, and these kind of bases of suppression are still quite extant and wide-ranging in the capital.
Daniel, we've seen the Iranians target airports throughout the Middle East. What is their aims when it comes to that? Disruption? Are they achieving said aims with the capabilities that they have?
The aim from the Islamic Republic initially would have been to pressure the United States through causing, as you say, this disruption. And they may have expected the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris to kind of put pressure on the US and say, this is untenable. We need to come to some kind of conclusion very quickly. Our tourism, our foreign residents here, our own people, financial hubs, etc., transportation hubs. We can't do that. But Iran really has badly miscalculated on this. We've seen the reactions from the Gulf, and essentially they've been full court press. Keep going, America. Keep going, Donald Trump. Iran is really, as I say, badly miscalculated. So that would have been their aim, their strategy, but it has not worked as they would have expected.
Daniel, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of the conflict for our viewers. The US president has said that Iran's military has been severely degrading under the US-Israel joint campaign, claiming Iran's army, navy, communications and leadership have been eliminated in the ongoing conflict with Tehran. Trump said that Iran is down to its third set of leaders and that its air force has been wiped out, with all 32 of its ships sunk in the water. His comments follow the US and Israeli offensive against Iran, which has sparked intensified strikes, retaliatory missile and drone attacks, and growing regional tensions. Trump also dismissed questions about Russian assistance to Tehran as irrelevant in that moment. His assertions come as the US demands Iran's unconditional surrender and continues military operations in the Middle East. Let's take a listen in directly to the US President's statement.
Right, that's right. There's a lot. We're doing by the way, in Iran, we're doing very well. Somebody said, how would you score it from 0 to 10? I said, I'd give it a 12 to a 15. Their army is gone. They're just about, look, their navy is gone. Their communications are gone. Their leaders are gone. 2 sets of their leaders are gone. They're down to their 3rd set. Their air force is wiped out entirely. Think of it. They have 32 ships. All 32 are at the bottom of the ocean. Other than that, they're doing very well, Coach. Very well. We're doing, our military is doing phenomenally. That's the big thing for this week. We seem to have a new thing every week, but the situation with a very bad and very sick group of leaders who were killing a lot of people. A lot of our people were being killed. They were being maimed. They were being destroyed with their bombs all over the place, planted in roads, and we call them the roadside bombs, walking around without legs, without arms, face blasted, killed many, many people. And we had a choice. We could take it and go on like that for years or do something about it, and we did something about it, and people are very impressed with our military, and they admire our military with what happened in Venezuela and what's happening now, what's happened with the B-2 bombers before this, where they took out the nuclear capability or potential of Iran. I think we're, right now, we're a country that's more respected than we've ever been respected before. I saw what was happening with college sports, and it doesn't sound very important compared to what's happening in Iran and other places, but it is very important to me. And if I can get it done, I'll get it done.
Daniel, listening to the US president there, he touts of extreme success given just a single week of the US and Israeli strikes inside Iran. What exactly are Iran's current military capabilities, and has Donald Trump and Israel completely crippled them like he seems to claim?
Well, notwithstanding the president's usual colorful bombast, he is a salesman at heart. I think directionally it's pretty accurate from all accounts. Iran, as most people know, historically and probably even now, had the region's biggest arsenal of missiles, and that was really the thing that everybody was very, very scared of, very fretful about. In the first couple of days, you may have seen the graphs, the trajectory of the missile launches, which is a good indicator of how many they've got left, has really been in free fall, and we are, what, 7 days in. It goes like that, essentially, down, 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 down. If Iran still maintained those kind of missile capabilities, then you'd see a much flatter trajectory or even going up. So that is a big indicator. In terms of the Air Force, Iran it's always been an irrelevant entity anyway. The Iranian Air Force, very old. Their airplanes predate the revolution, so they're from the 70s. The Navy also, they have these patrol boats which have harassed U.S. Navy, for years and years and years. But their bigger fleets also not much to write home about. And as President Trump said, I don't think he'd lie about this. There is quite striking footage of many of these vessels being blown to smithereens, and as he said, now sitting at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. So, all in all, I think the president is directionally correct.
And Daniel, in terms of Iranian leadership, where does that stand? Of course, we saw on the first day the Ayatollah being killed, and then his second in command. What's the stability of that right now? Who's leading Iran in this conflict?
Seems to be 2 gentlemen. One, Ali Larijani, who is the kind of more the political apparatchik. He's dealing with the political side of things. And then Galabaf, GH, Galabaf is the kind of military in command, it seems. Notwithstanding that, um, I think going back to that first question about how Iran was striking all its Gulf neighbors rather willy-nilly, that really was an indication that there wasn't much military command and control going on, and I don't think has that has not returned, even though Galabaf is nominally in control. But anyway, it's these two pretty hardcore ideologues of the regime. They're both huge regime insiders. They're not kind of the A plus ideologues as Khamenei was, but they're still, a B plus in terms of their ideology. So it's still pretty hardcore. But it's those two in charge, with not much proper command and control structures going on.
Okay, Daniel, do stay with us once again. We have statements coming from the White House. Washington has confirmed that the US has enough weapons stockpiles to meet its operational needs, especially concerning the ongoing conflict in Iran. Spokesperson Caroline Leavitt has made this statement as President Trump prepares for a meeting with major defense contractors. The meeting is scheduled for Friday, aims to discuss increasing US manufacturing of weapons. Trump has been a strong advocate for boosting production and ensuring that American-made weapons remain the best in the world. Let's take a listen in.
As you all know, the president will be meeting with defense contractors here at the White House in a few minutes with Secretary Hegseth. This is a pre-scheduled meeting, and the purpose of it is to talk about the president's aggressive and fierce support for rapidly increasing the ability of U.S. manufacturers to produce American-made weapons, which we know are the best in the world. The president signed an executive order on this earlier this year. This is a long-held policy objective of this administration. And so he'll be speaking directly with these defense contractors. But of course, as the president has maintained, we have more than enough ammunition, weapons, stockpiles to achieve the objectives of Operation Epic Fury.
The White House press secretary also claimed that the US is well on its way to taking control of Iranian airspace. Leavitt stated that while exact timelines are not being confirmed, US objectives for Operation Epic Fury are expected to be completed within 4 to 6 weeks. According to her, the US military has also made strides in eliminating ballistic missile threats posed by Iran. Let's take a listen in further.
I won't get ahead of the president on broadcasting any timelines. What I will tell you is what President Trump has already laid out, which is that the achievable objectives of Operation Epic Fury we expect to last about 4 to 6 weeks, and we are well on our way to achieving those objectives. Annihilating Iran's navy, we know that we've sunk more than 30 Iranian vessels and ships. Their navy has now been deemed combat ineffective. Taking out the ballistic missile threat that Iran posed to the United States and our troops and bases in the region, we have done a tremendous.
Daniel, of course, there is huge concerns from the US public about the length of this war. How crucial is it for the Trump administration that this is a short operation? Of course, a lot of people are reminded of 2003, another operation which was claimed to last a short amount of time as well. It lasted years. How crucial is it for Trump and his administration that this sticks to the timeline?
I think it's less about the length rather than in terms of US troops on the ground. The comparison to Iraq is tempting, but I think it's probably misguided here. 2003, yes, there was the shock and awe, a similar kind of air game, and then followed by, I think it was 250,000 of US troops. That is not going to happen. There's not going to be anywhere like that kind of numbers of American troops on the ground. I think that's what the American public would strongly object to. In terms of using US air strikes. I think the American public is absolutely fine with that in general. Obviously, 6 U.S. service persons have lost their lives already, which is, obviously a tragedy. But as I say, I think it's more about, it's less about the length, and it's more about the strategy that the American government and military use to actually effect these objectives that the press secretary laid out.
What about the response domestically, Daniel? We know Donald Trump campaigned on a manifesto of not dragging the United States into what are called forever wars. How crucial has that been in terms of this conflict, and what's been the response across the political spectrum to this conflict?
Yeah, as I say, I don't think this is going to be classified when it's all said and done as one of those forever wars. I was listening to an interesting, earlier analyst talk about the kind of perhaps being optimistic, but talking about framing it as the kind of Goldilocks zone in terms of U.S. Middle East intervention. So in 1991, the U.S. did too little with Iraq. It failed to go and go to Baghdad and take out Saddam. And then in 2003, as you've mentioned, it did far too much. Perhaps the president has, he's taken on board those lessons, and this is some kind of middle ground. In terms of the reactions from the political spectrum, as you'd expect, the political enemies of the president, the Democrats, are very much against this. There are certain members of his isolationist wing in his own party, the GOP, that are also very vocally against it. But I think that the mainstream of the Republican Party, and in particular, importantly, some of the big hitters, are very, very supportive. And as we see, his cabinet, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, President Vance, even though he may have different foreign policy ideas to Trump, have all been very supportive, and it's been pretty cohesive with the White House.
Okay, Daniel, do stay with us for our final update coming out of that conflict. At least 1,332 Iranian civilians have been killed in the ongoing conflict with Israel, according to Iran's UN ambassador, Amir Sayed Iravani. Thousands more are reported injured. Iravani claimed that the US and Israel had deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure, while Iran maintained it had only targeted military sites. Furthermore, the US and Israel have denied these accusations. US officials are investigating the role of US forces in an attack on an Iranian girls' school, which resulted in the deaths of several children, over 100. Iravani has condemned US President Donald Trump's interference in Iran's leadership selection, calling it a violation of the UN Charter. As diplomatic efforts begin, mediation efforts by other countries have been reported. Let's take a listen in.
Despite our repeated communication to the Security Council calling for an immediate halt to this criminal war, the Council has remained silent. It has chosen to turn a blind eye to these grave violations, despite its primary responsibility under the Charter of the United Nations to maintain international peace and security. According to the latest report of the Iranian Red Crescent Society, at least 1,332 civilians, including women and children, have lost their lives so far. Thousands more have been injured, and the number continues to rise. We reiterate our call on the Security Council and Secretary General to condemn the aggression, war crimes, and crime against humanity that are being committed by the United States and the Israeli regime against our people, to force the aggressor to put an immediate end to all crimes and military attack against Iran and against civilian infrastructure, to ensure accountability for these grave violations of international humanitarian law and war crimes. We continue to exercise our inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations until this aggression and this barbaric attack stop.
Daniel, is there any weight in the Iranian ambassador's words there? Over 1,000 Iranian civilians killed, allegedly. Of course, on the first day of the war, we also saw that strike which hit an Iranian girls' school, killing reportedly over 100 students. The investigation into that, how important is that investigation?
Well, absolutely. Any civilians being targeted or killed is abominable and a tragedy. But just a little bit of context about your chap Iravani. Not an enviable position that he has. His job is to really foment propaganda, to lie on behalf of the Islamic regime. In particular, I've been watching his performances trying to justify Iran's nuclear program. Pretty much everything he says is a fabrication, and no doubt what he's saying now is a fabrication as well. If there has been, if it turns out that the US and Israel are responsible for this, then, obviously one would condemn it. But having said that, there's absolutely no reason that these would be deliberate strikes, as Iravani seems to be intimating. Obviously, Israel and the US want the Iranian people who are being occupied by this Islamic regime on their side, and there'd be absolutely no reason to target civilian infrastructures. On the other hand, Iran, as we see, absolutely does it all the time, try to target civilian infrastructure in the Gulf, amongst even its purported Muslim brothers. So a little bit of context about Iravani there, but certainly it is awful for those schoolgirls.
Daniel Roth, thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. Great pleasure to talk to you and get your insight. We'll of course be continuing to cover the ongoing conflict as it escalates in the Middle East. But now, further updates, this time coming out directly from the United States. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced that the US may remove sanctions on more Russian oil following a 30-day waiver that allowed the sale of stranded Russian crude to India. Bessent said that there are hundreds of millions of sanctioned barrels of oil currently in transit, and unsanctioning them would help increasing global supply. Additionally, Bessent warned of the possibility of the US military's largest bombing campaign against Iran yet, targeting key military infrastructure such as missile launchers and missile factories. Let's take a listen in to the Treasury Secretary.
The Indians had been very good actors. We had asked them to stop buying sanctioned Russian oil this fall. They did. They were going to substitute it with U.S. oil, but to ease the temporary gap of oil around the world, we have given them permission to accept the Russian oil. We may unsanction other Russian oil. The other thing Treasury can do here, Larry, is there are hundreds of millions of sanctioned barrels of sanctioned crude on the water, and in essence, by unsanctioning them, Treasury can create supply. And we are looking at that. We will await to hear from CENTCOM and in terms of when they think safe passage is possible. But we've actually seen some Iranian vessels go out. We've seen some Chinese vessels go out. So I think that this could be a matter of, I don't know whether it's a week or 2 weeks, but we are on track to get this solved.
We move on now. Further updates coming in from Europe. Lithuanian intelligence has raised concerns about Russia expanding its military presence along the NATO border, providing troops with combat experience in Ukraine, which could later be used as strategic hubs in a potential future conflict with NATO. According to Lithuania's annual security threat assessment, Russia could be preparing for a large-scale military conflict with NATO within the next 6 years if sanctions are lifted. The report also highlighted Russia's continued goals of tipping the balance of power in Europe and fully subjugating Ukraine. Additionally, Lithuania's military intelligence stated that recent disruptions in gas pipelines and power cables in the Baltic Sea, attributed to ships from Russian ports, were accidental rather than deliberate. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Šiuo metu didžioji dalis Rusijos karinių pajėgumų yra sutelkti fronto linijoje Ukrainoje. Tačiau net ir kariaudama, Rusija vykdo ginkluotųjų pajėgų reformą, dėl kurios auga kariniai pajėgumai Kaliningrado srityje ir prie rytinių NATO sienų. Esamoje saugumo situacijoje pagrindinė žvalgybos užduotis nuolat ir žinoti, koks yra Rusijos karinis potencialas, ketinimai ir veiksmai. Vertinti visus galimus karinės grėsmės Lietuvai scenarius ir jų pasireiškimo tikimybę.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a visit to the front line in Donetsk, where Ukrainian forces are engaged in intense combat with Russian troops. The visit highlights Ukraine's efforts to bolster its defences amid continued Russian advances. According to the Institute for the Study of War, February saw the slowest Russian progress on the front in nearly 2 years, with Ukrainian forces successfully pushing back in certain areas. Zelensky emphasized that Russia is preparing for a spring offensive and it is crucial for Ukraine to maintain strong positions. During his visit, Zelensky awarded soldiers for their efforts and reiterated the importance of strength both on the battlefield and in negotiations. Joining us to discuss the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war is Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. Given the conflict in the Middle East concurrently, how crucial is Zelensky looking at this time period as an element that he does not want the Ukraine and Russian war to be taken from people's attention? And what do you make of the most recent developments?
For Ukraine, yes, the attention itself is matter, but another thing is oil and ammunition. In case of oil, last year, both the US and Ukraine concentrated to attack energy export from Russia. So that's why the energy facility is the target of the attack from Ukraine, and US impose sanctions to Russia. But currently, because of the Iran's tactics to attack many oil facilities, countries around Iran, the amount of the oil export from the Gulf country is facing crisis. So that's why in the oil market, the price is rising. And to deal with this, US allow Russia to export oil. In this case, there's a possibility that Russia will get more income. And Ukraine and the US operation last year to attack the energy export from Russia is facing crisis. So that's why the view from the Ukraine, the world attention is also one thing, but another thing is because of the income from oil export, Russia will get military power to invade Ukraine more, could happen. So that's why they are worrying. And another thing is ammunition. If the US spend too much ammunition in Iran, there's a possibility Ukraine cannot get enough ammunition. That is also the concern. And if Russia believes NATO does not have enough ammunition to support Ukraine, Russia has the reason to expand their military operation. So view from this, Ukraine is worrying. But one thing we should not forget is this U.S. operation against Iran is air and sea attack, but there is no ground troops in Iran. This means that anytime U.S. can stop firing the missiles, and so that's why if the U.S. run out the missile, they can save the stock and still keep some ammunition for the battle in Ukraine could happen. So that's why the market, the people are worrying and the oil price is rising, or ammunition, the people are worrying amount of the ammunition US has. But reality is, U.S. can control how much ammunition they can use. They will use. That is also the fact. So we should not forget.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, stay with us. We're turning over to our next story, where the United Nations humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher has said that the UN is seeing staggering amounts of money, reportedly $1 billion a day, funding this war spent on destruction, while politicians continue to boast about cutting aid budgets for those in greatest need. Fletcher added that this is being spent on this conflict rather than dealing with the existing huge humanitarian caseload. He's also said that the UN has lost its bearings somehow in the world. Let's take a listen in to Tom Fletcher.
This is a moment of grave peril right now. We're seeing these crises escalate rapidly with consequences that are out of control for those instigating the conflict. And we're seeing increasing linkages between these different humanitarian crises, none of them good. We're seeing staggering amounts of money, reportedly $1 billion a day, funding this war, spent on destruction, while politicians continue to boast about cutting aid budgets for those in greatest need. And as the Secretary General has said, and as you'll have heard from Steph, what we need is de-escalation, an immediate cessation of hostilities, genuine dialogue and negotiations, in line with the Charter of the United Nations. We need calmer heads to prevail.
Dr. Nagao, what do you make of the humanitarian chief there for the United Nations' statement, saying that the UN and the attitude towards it has lost its way in 2026?
In this case, of course, the budget is one, but how to use is matter. So, of course, since escalating US-China competition, country in the Indo-Pacific rising the military budget, but since Russia's aggression to Ukraine, the European country increased their defense budget. And now, because of the US asked the allies and partner to increase their defense budget, they will increase the defense budget from the 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP. This means that more than double they need to prepare the budget. In this case, how to find the budget is matter. So that's why reducing the other budget is unavoidable. And humanitarian assistance could be the target, because humanitarian assistance is assistance to the other people, not assistance to their domestic society, direct link with voting or others. So that's why the humanitarian assistance could face a serious situation is logical. But at the same time, it is also true, increasing the conflict is also affecting, because many people who want to donate the money to the conflict, the people in the conflict zone, also face shortages, because big conflict like Russia's aggression to Ukraine, the big attention concentrate this conflict, but at the same time in Myanmar, Sudan, the other areas, there are many conflict and humanitarian assistance needed, but people who have already spent money for the people in Ukraine and they cannot prepare enough budget for other conflict, that is also happening. So that's what in total, anyway, the humanitarian assistance is losing the budget. One more thing I should not forget is the economy itself. The economy itself faced something, the crisis, because of the COVID-19, because of the other mood of the global free trade. So rule is changing. So that's why all of these are affecting the humanitarian assistance, and so budget is not enough. It's logical, I understand.
Dr. Nagao, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you here on NewsX World. We have some breaking news coming in to finish this hour. The Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi has came down heavily on the United States, condemning the American strikes, which targeted children and the innocent. Abbas Araghchi said that Iran's response would inevitably be directed at American bases and institutions. In a post on X, Araghchi has accused the US of launching attacks from the lands of Iran and its Arab friends to target children and the innocent in the country. The Pentagon has appointed Gavin Kliger as its new data chief officer. Kliger, a computer scientist who played a role in Elon Musk's efforts to overhaul the government last year, now takes center stage in the Pentagon's AI initiatives. Kliger's new role involves aligning and executing the department's ambitious AI projects, working directly with America's leading AI labs. However, his past online posts, which have promoted white supremacist Nick Fuentes and misogynist Andrew Tate, have sparked controversy. The Pentagon is in a tense standoff with AI firm Anthropic after a disagreement over the military use of AI tools, including autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.